Thank you very much, Jenny, and thank you for inviting me. I'm really honored to be here. I think you have a really great conference here, and actually I think we can learn a lot from especially the bottom-up approach you have worked here with here in Ireland. In Denmark, we have more like have had a very top-down approach, and what I will talk about here is how we change that. So I will talk about today is a big governance decision we made last year, and there's a lot in that. But in this speak, I will make a more view on the governance perspective of that. So I can't come around everything in that decision. That's not possible in half an hour. But so I will take this governance perspective. So last year there was this new parliament decision. I'll shortly talk about that. Then I will talk about the Danish top-down regulation that is have been a tradition for many years, and then I will talk about the preconditions for the changes we made, because understanding why things are happening and understanding kind of what is going on in another country is not that easy. We can easily compare different countries, but really understand why things happening is actually quite difficult. Then I will talk about this new governance structure where I think we'll come up with a system where we really try to balance top down and bottom up. I've been working in the Baltic Sea and the North Sea project, and one of the things we always discussed in these projects have been how to balance top-down, bottom-up governance systems. It seems like some are coming with a more top-down, and then there's a lack of bottom-up approach, and then maybe here in Ireland, and I know specifically in the UK, they are very good at bottom-up processes. We learned a lot, but on the other hand, they have difficulties with the top-down, and you know, fixing that has seemed to be quite a difficult task. So what I will present here is actually, I think, quite an interesting combination of top-down, bottom-up approach. Yeah. And that includes some new features, coastal water boards, and implementing committees. Yeah. So this new parliament decision last year was a really big decision, and you have to understand that coastal waters and the conditions there has been a subject on high-level parliament decisions for decades in Denmark. So it's just an ongoing discussion. So it's not coming out of the blue. So what is decided is to actually take 400,000 hectares of farmland, that's equivalent to 15%, out of production and make it to nature. That means new forests, re-wetting organic soils, wetlands, constructive wetlands, and so on. And make 20% of Denmark to be protected nature. A new nitrogen regulation, not least, world's first CO2 tax on agriculture. That's also, you know, a new, relatively new thing. These climate targets, it has been discussed for several years that there has to be done something with agriculture, and ended with this CO2 tax on agriculture, and then it includes this more local based approach to land management and coastal waters. So there is this included with changing the governance system. And then a lot of money. And I think it's of course interesting, you know, with the money, but I think, as you probably know, they also came with a suitcase full of money in the Netherlands a few years ago, and it didn't end that well. So I think hopefully this governance perspective and changes in governments can demonstrate that how important it is. Even though you have money, it's not enough. You have to figure out how to work together to use the money. So hopefully Denmark will demonstrate, you know, compared to the Netherlands, that we also bring in a lot of money, but we do it in a different way, and we can actually figure this out. And then also Novo Nordisk Foundation have a lot of money for the moment, and of course all the money there, the Danish economic environment is quite good, and also Novo Nordisk producing these products, as you probably know. So there is a kind of stick and carrot in these things. One of them, two of the sticks is this new nitrogen regulation. I could, you know, talk for a few hours about that alone, but that actually drives a lot, because we have these targets for nitrogen reduction, and if they are not met with taking land out of production, then they will be met with a new regulation that can, in some areas, hit the farmers hard. And the other thing is the CO2 on agriculture. One of the things is that there is a tax on organic soils. So, as you probably know, organic soils, if they are drained, they will leak CO2 to the atmosphere. So the idea is to re-wet the organic soils, and then they have to be taken out of production. So they introduce a tax on organic soils, so the farmers had to pay a tax for these organic soils, or they could get a funding, compensation, full compensated if they take them out of production. So it's kind of double. You get money if you move over here, or if you don't, you have to pay. So we'll see how that works. But so a little bit about the top-down regulation. How has that worked the last 20, 30 years? So there was a goal back long time in '87, before the Water Frame Directive, long before the Water Frame Directive, to reduce nitrogen leaching from the fields to the coastal waters with 50%. That was due to the condition in the coastal waters, oxygen depletion mainly was driving this. So already back in the 80s, and especially in the 90s, we introduced a lot of things like catch crops, green fields in winter, slurry, all kind of stuff there was introduced, and also a system for keeping track with all the manure and so on. Really complicated system. But as you can see, what happened was that the use of manure was improving, so the utilization of N in annual manure was increased a lot during these years, so the regulation worked. And you can also see at the same time the use of mineral fertilizer decreased. So you can also say that in the 80s, the farmers used both manure and also added on mineral fertilizer just to be safe. So the regulation, this top-down regulation, kind of figure out how much is actually needed. So we have a system where each farm has a certain amount of manure and mineral fertilizer for exactly the specific crops they have on the fields. So this is calculated for each farm every year, depending on what crop they have. And if we look at the yearly loads of nitrogen to the coastal waters, we can actually see almost a 50% reduction due to that regulation. So it worked quite well, you could say. And then in since 2010, we haven't really seen that much. So, and of course, when you start to do measures, you can do measures, the same measures to a certain extent, but if you have made your fields green, then you can't make them greener. Or I mean, you can have a certain amount of catch crops, and you can do a certain amount. So we haven't really, I mean, since 2010, it has just been an ongoing discussion, what to do, and also a lot of confusion, especially between scientists in the catchment and working with agriculture and scientists in the marine environment, because in the marine environment, scientists, say, yeah, but it's not good enough. We have to decrease the input to the coastal water. Why can't you just do this and this and this? And it wasn't that simple. So this discussion have been ongoing for quite some time, and I think the latest decision here shows that it's finally understood. So there was also some implication of this top-down governance, and really have to care that much about building partnerships, about, you can just add in whatever you want in a plan, the design, you can do top-down, and everything you can do top-down. You can implement the plan with mandatory catch crops and mandatory everything, legislation. And that was, we did in Denmark, more or less. But the lack, or the implication is, when you do that really hard, is a lack of trust and really no ownership among farmers to solve the problems, and even confrontation when the top-down regulation becomes, too hard. So, especially the ownership to solve the problem, have been completely gone. As long as they follow the legislation, everything is good. So why care? That's actually the implication of only doing top-down. So we started kind of, or we are starting now at a really zero. Like we have really to get the farmers on board now, because the only thing they have done is to follow the legislation with the help of advisors, saying you have to have, this year you have to have so many catch crops, and then they don't think further. So that is basically where we start now. We have to get the farmers on board in everything. So we are starting at a zero now with a bottom-up approach. So, and this is the status according to our Danish EPA on the coastal waters. So you probably know the colors. I don't have to explain them. Is there a green one? No, not really. So all coastal waters are, no one of the coastal waters are in good ecological status. So even though we reduce nitrate with 50%, we still have a high challenge or a big challenge. And also I could show you a map with the oxygen depletion in the coastal waters, and we see that is we actually fighting against the climate changes. We know that the oxygen depletion is becoming a bigger problem with higher bottom water temperatures. We can see actually a direct correlation with higher bottom water temperatures and oxygen depletion. And of course also we'll see in some areas we'll see more rain and then more nutrient losses to the coastal waters. So it is a bit of a fight against the climate changes. It's hard to see where that will end. So the current plan now for nitrogen reduction is this map actually made by the government and the EPA. And so as you can see, the nitrogen reduction targets or requirement for agriculture-related emission is different in different areas. And so mainly it's for the inner waters they are highest. And but the problem is, of course, as you can see, in some areas they are like quite high. Let's say that. So over 50% is high when we have already made a 50% reduction. So 60–80% reduction is like, I don't know how that is going to happen. And in my opinion, it also reflects that the scientists that made these reduction targets are marine scientists using only marine models. So they haven't really asked what can the catchment deliver. And some of the new governance structure, we are able to discuss these targets a bit. I will come back to that. Just to say that there is still, really big challenges. So what I want to go into now is a little bit more about understanding the preconditions for the changes. So this is a bit about Danish culture. So what I can say is that this very top-down way of doing things is not really the way we normally work in we normally do things in Denmark. So just to give you some of the preconditions is that generally there is a really high trust in the Danish society, actually in the whole Scandinavia. I'll show you a list in a second between people, and that is very important. Trust is really, really important, for working together. And then we also have this tradition for associations. So there is this crazy saying, when two Danes meet, they shake hands, and when three meet, they form an association. And we have, like associations for like everything. And also another thing is, and I'll come back to that also, is the Danish labor market model, a kind of a three-party cooperation where the wage negotiations are decentralized. So we don't have a minimum standard set by the government. It's discussed locally, and so that is actually something that is working quite well. There's a lot of benefits with that, and you can say, well, isn't the wages then very low? No, they are actually higher in other countries. So there is this trust in that model that actually on a local level you can figure things out. So that is just to set the idea about how we normally work and work together in the Danish society. So So this is a list I got from a professor at Aarhus University that has been studying trust his whole life. He just gave me that list before I came over here. So you see the Scandinavian countries are ranking quite high. Yeah, I was able to also add Ireland in. Jenny said, are we at the bottom of the list? Or you are not. You are in the top 20. So, you know, my opinion on this is that we never really used our potential for working together. So I think this demonstrates very well. So this is a list where they ask people, do you trust, not your family or your friend, but do you trust, you know, people around in the society you don't know? And that's that's actually a really important thing for the society is the trust between people. And then another thing I would like to mention, I'll come back to that, is these community sports halls in rural Denmark for this bottom-up approach we are now doing and getting farmers involved. And so we have, you can see it on the right, these halls where there are a lot of sports and social events. So in rural areas, this is kind of a meeting place, rural meeting place, and they are, I mean, it's really important places for people to meet. And in some sports, due to these halls, it's really powerhouses like in. You probably don't know what handball is, but that's something we play there, and due to this, you know, social things, it's a really important sport in Denmark, and also other things like badminton and so on. I'll come back to why these are important. Yeah. So at SEGES we have been working, you know, to make the structure for bottom-up approaches, like how do we work together, you know, all these kinds of things. But one thing, you know, that came as a surprise for me was this national deal that was made, and I'll try to explain it here what happened. So during the discussion how to make tax on agriculture, you know, the government didn't really came anywhere. So there was a minister that came up with, probably the minister, that came up with the idea. Okay, we'll the discussion, we'll put it in a green tripartite club where they can discuss this. And the mandate for that was that we have this reduction target for greenhouse gases. So that was actually driving this process. And another thing was that it was directly inspired from this tradition for the labor market I just talked about. So they put together these stakeholders and said, now you have to figure it out. On a parliament level we can't. So they took the Danish Agriculture and Food Council, that is the farmers' union on a national level more or less, and the biggest, most influential green organization, the Danish Society of Nature Conservation, put them in a room together with the national organization or association for all the municipalities, and then some industries, and said, now you have to discuss this subject with CO2. You have to find a solution for this. And then they said, yes, but if we have, we have to discuss the organic soils, and then why not include nature and why not include nitrate? And then suddenly they included all these things and they actually came out with a plan. And of course they were facilitated by the government, and also they knew that there was money included and so on. So the whole plan was actually made by these organizations together with the government sitting, at the side. And one of the interesting thing is that we actually have a new ministry established for the first time, based on a decision. So this plan they came up with in June was later the fall. I think it was in October, November, implemented by the Danish Parliament in a broad coalition on both sides in the Parliament. And then they decided to make a new ministry on that decision, the Ministry for Green Tripartite, that includes a big part of the environmental ministry and a big part of the agriculture ministry. So we have now a minister in head of this decision, just to do all the stuff in this decision there. And it's organized like this. So we have the minister in top, and then a green political forum based of these stakeholder organizations. So they are very, very high in that hierarchy. And then we have a national steering group where all the other ministries are involved. And then below that we have some technical groups trying to solve all the problems. And this is until here, this is on a national scale, and then it becomes the bottom-up processes with these 23 new local tripartite, where the real implementation is actually going to be done. You can also call them local implementation. And then there was made this opportunity for making coastal water boards. I will explain about that. So the way they work, what is the difference between coastal water boards and these new local implementation stuff there? I'll try to explain. So at a national level, we have the National River Basin Management Plan that describes what is the reduction targets, how to achieve good ecological status, and that is of course the official plan. How long time do I have? Okay, 10 minutes. Yeah, all right. So that is what they are implementing. That is the official plan. But then, as you saw, there was also a lot of challenges with the plan. So they actually allowed these coastal water boards here to make a lot of new adjustment to a coming plan to make it better. And then all these things goes into the official plan, and then in the next plan, that's what is to be implemented. And it's decided to have a new plan every third year. So every third year there will be a new plan, a new updated plan. So I also try to describe it here. So what you can see is the former governance structure where the ministry and the EPAs made the plan with public hearing. And the public hearing is always difficult when you already made a plan. It's like, I never really seen that, important stuff is being implemented there in that plan. So now it is possible. So now on the right side, you can see that the minister give the chance to a coastal water board to actually make a local plan. And it goes into a water plan, and then it goes back to the minister again. And of course, there is a few things around that is not totally figured out, how to implement things from a coastal water board into a national plan, that has to be figured out. And it could be a little bit complicated, but you know, we'll have to work on that. Yeah. So the bottom-up approach again now is that the local tripartite is implementing, while the coastal water board has an opportunity to work with all these things to improve the plan, the next plan. So the local implementation committees or local tripartites there's 23 of these. So they are tasked to make 23 plans to take land out of production for all these measures at the end of this year. So they are working really hard now. And of course, that would be the first generation plan. They would be updated, of course. And there are representatives for the municipalities, from the Farmer Union, from the Danish Nature Conservation Association, and also from the Danish Nature Agency, because they are also implementing. So you can actually see here that the same national is repeated on a local scale. And of course, there is a challenge with these things because on a local scale, do they have the capacity and the knowledge and so on? So that's a big thing now, you know, to get, as you also heard you talked about today, you know, capacity and knowledge. So that's a big thing now. And then also we have this technical level where we have the catchment officers and on a technical level, the municipalities working, you know, to actually on a technical level make the plan, and then they will be prioritized on this more local political level, where they are agreed between the stakeholders and so on. So how is it done? So right now you can see these sports halls in action. So that's why I mentioned them. So right now, not all part of country, not everybody are as good, but in a lot of areas in the country, they are actually getting farmers on board now. So it's happening. Like we started up with collective meetings, the idea of collecting meeting with farmers, like maybe 10 farmers, getting them on board and drawing on maps and so on. And it's a really interesting thing what happens when you do that. But now, right now it's scaled up to maybe in some cases we have meetings where 200 or 300 farmers are at a meeting, and then you can see here in one end they start up with drinking coffee and have a meeting and, you know, telling about what is going on. And then in the other end there's just like tables like you have here with maps, and then they find their own fields and then they start drawing. And it is a bit magic to have farmers drawing on maps, because then they are actually on board and then they are able to tell their own story about where are what fields are wet, what fields are drained, and so on, so on. So our experience is that this works very, very well. And of course, I'm also surprised that they managed now locally to get 200 or 300 farmers on board. But it's happening many places now. And then finally, the coastal water boards, a little bit about them. So this is not something that is, so this is an opportunity to make a coastal water board. If they like, if they think we can actually do better, then it's done in a certain way that it has to be a partnership. It has to start with a partnership. It has to start with local representatives of the Danish Nature Conservation Association and the farmers are getting together and said, okay, let's try to start a coastal water board, and then they can ask the local municipalities to say, would you facilitate this process? And then they can apply for money, and then they can get other stakeholders on board. Up to 20 different organizations can be part of that. And then they can apply for a budget for the coming years for the use of experts. And I think that's really interesting. So it's not expert asking stakeholders. Here it's actually stakeholders that have the money to say to experts, we want to, you to investigate these and these things. And that is turning a little bit around, and it means that when they have done these investigations with the help of experts, they actually have the complete ownership. They own, it's not, there's a, when you turn it around and you actually are so involved, you have much more ownership to the plan. And hopefully these plans go into the national plans, and then they can recognize these plans when they have to implement the plans. So that's the idea, much more ownership in the plans, because the plans have to be implemented at a certain time. So that's the most new thing, is these coastal water boards, where they are actually using experts in that way. So we now have just started up with these 17 water boards that are funded for the next years, and it's mainly at the catchment where they are most challenged. So they really like to see if they can come up with some better ways to achieve good ecological status. Instead of reducing nitrate with 80%, maybe they can reduce nitrate with less, and then reduce phosphorus with more, and make other things, maybe marine measures, and trawling after mussels or whatever that can help the water. Coastal waters are complicated to manage, so there are more than nitrate, even though nitrate is very important. Yeah. So I'm running out of time, and I think I'm finished. So this is the thing they can carry out. And so this is my final slide and my final message. So building a governance system build a governance system for the problem you want to solve. So I think that's what we learned in Denmark. We want to solve this reduction, and we did it with top down, and then we kind of got stuck in a governance system that didn't work for the next more complicated problem. So hopefully we came up with a new governance system that will help us. And this is me asking AI to describe the Danish governance system. It's very complicated to describe a governance system, so yeah, thank you very much.